Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory. Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. So, interestingly enough, I asked a question on the last episode, which was about friendship. I always ask people, is there, any topics you want to hear about? So after the friendship episode, I actually had some people reach out to me, and they were all interested in me doing an episode about families, since I did one about friendship. So I wasn't going to do one about families right now, but I'm going to answer those requests. So families can be tricky, kind of like friendships. So I think that's probably why it prompted people to reach out to me, because I think it triggered some things in people when we were talking about friendship. So there can be, really good things about families, and then there can be some really rough things about families. So I want to start off with some quotes from some people about families. One is from John Wooden. The most important thing in the world is family and love. Eva Burroughs said, the love of a family is life's greatest blessing. Alex Haley said, in every conceivable manner, the family is a link to our past and a bridge to our future. A few funny ones that I thought were, Les Dawson said, families are like fudge, mostly sweet with a few nuts. Isn't that the truth? Cary Grant said, insanity runs in my family. It practically gallops. Douglas Copeland said, people are pretty forgiving when it comes to other people's families. The only family that ever horrifies you is your own. I believe that's true for a lot of people as well. One of the definitions I found for family is the family is the foundational institution of society ordained by God. It is constituted by marriage and is composed of persons related to one another by marriage, blood, or adoption. One of the most important things the Bible teaches us about families is that they are a source of blessing from God. God sets the lonely in families. Psalm 68. Blesses children who obey their parents. Exodus 20. And blesses parents with children. Psalm 127. The hierarchy of the family in the Bible is God, spouse, children, parents, extended family, brothers and sisters in Christ, and then the rest of the world. I'm very interested in family dynamics. I just have always been fascinated by that. Probably a lot of that comes from, my dad was he did a lot of studying of peoples and cultures and things. And so I've always just been kind of fascinated by family dynamics and family traits. I have that in my own little world. In my family, we were a small group, my mom and dad, my brother and sister and I. And then when I was married before to the father of my children, it was he and I and our three children. So that's what I kind of obviously base my impression of family dynamics. So I just think it really forms who you are as a person. Where are you in the birth order in the family? Who gets along with each other? Who has things in common? Where do you get certain traits? Like I've said in other episodes, I've said what I've gotten from my dad. I've said what I've gotten from my mother. My brother and sister, have gotten different things from them because we're not the same people. And it's kind of the same thing with my children. there's certain things that are like me, certain things like their dad, and then things that are a combo platter. But I just think it's really interesting to see family dynamics, like who gravitates to each other. It's not always the stereotypical thing of like the mom and the daughter and the dad and the son. I don't think it's like that in every family. I do think birth order has a lot to do with things. But anyway, I love family dynamics and love birth order. So, with the firstborn, I always call them the trial and error child because you've never been a parent before. So you kind of, do your best raising that first child, and you make a lot of mistakes, and God willing, they make it through all your mistakes because you've never done it before, I feel like the firstborn child always has a lot of responsibility. I think there's a lot of pressure on the firstborn child for whatever reason. Maybe it's because you have this first child and you want them to be perfect and you want them to do, you have this idyllic vision of what you want this child to be because you've never had a child before. So you kind of like make up a thing in your head. At least maybe this is what I did. And then they're an actual person. And so they actually have their own way. They have their own personality, and maybe they're not what you anticipated them to be. So I feel like they have a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure. I think the middle children, contrary to what's like said about the forgotten middle child, I don't know that they're forgotten as much as maybe they're not as highlighted because, they're the middle child. So they kind of, the parent has already done it with the first child, and then the second one comes along and it gives a buddy to the first one. That's how I look at it. Then, however many middle children you have, there could be an abundance of middle children. So, there's the firstborn has all this responsibility and all eyes are focused on them at the beginning, then the middle children, and then comes the baby. Now, I was the baby of the family, and my brother and sister, 10 and 8 years older than me, so I was kind of like an only child, and I was the baby. So I was a completely different person than them. They were raised together, and they're not like me very much. And then there's me. I think the baby is handled in a very different way. I think the baby kind of gets away with a lot. I think the baby doesn't have as much pressure. It's like by the time the baby comes along, it's like everybody's doting on the baby. I know my youngest son got treated much differently than his brother and sister, and I'm sure that his sister would agree that, he kind of got away with a lot. He was just so funny, and he was so cute, and he really did get away with a lot. So I don't know if that was a good thing. I'm just being honest. So I do think when you have a family and you have children, I believe there becomes things like sibling rivalry, and I think there becomes an inner competition amongst a lot of people in the family. I think the children are competitive against each other. I think sometimes the children will vie for their parents' attention and try to take time away from the parents' time together. I think that becomes a problem. But generally, I think it depends on how close your children are in age. It depends on, how in tune you are to your family. If the parents both have a job, that takes time away from the family. Sometimes the children are, together without the parents there. Like maybe you have an older child that can take care of the younger ones so that the parents can go to work. There's all sorts of family dynamics and all sorts of, especially in this day and age with a lot of broken families, people have had to kind of piece together what a family looks like to them. I think back in the olden days, there was a very stereotypical family. There was mom, dad, children, dog, cat, picket fence, that sort of thing. That was like the picture perfect family. And then lots of divorces started happening. Then you bring in step parents, you bring in step children. There's two households. Children are being shuttled back and forth between two households. I never had that growing up. I don't know how that feels. I didn't have that with my children when I got divorced from their dad. They were all older. That's not the ideal situation for a family. That certainly isn't what God wanted, because God doesn't believe in divorce. So God wanted families to come into being. God wanted families to stay together for many reasons. And of course, we humans have mucked it up. So families have split apart. There's been reasons of infidelity, abuse, abandonment, substance abuse, alcoholism. All these things have broken apart the family, the ideal family that God wanted us to have. And so that's caused, a lot of different issues, in our world, in our families. So, I think that's something to look at. That I'm not saying back in the day that everything was perfect and everybody, just because they had the family dynamic of mom, dad, children, and all that, and they all lived together under the same roof, that everything was perfect. I'm not saying that, but certainly it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if everybody would have stuck with God's plan of no divorce, and to, if there was these situations that would come up, that they would try to work through them and keep the family together and keep the marriage together. Because remember, God's plan is the best plan, and we're the ones that muck it up. So speaking of back in the day, a few things about the Bible. First of all, about Bible stories about families. These aren't these aren't the happy family stories, but I just thought these were interesting. So some of the ones that were just showing the seriousness of families that don't get along, or that problems that arise and how people handle them. So Bible stories about families. Cain killed Abel, so that wasn't good. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery.
We'll be right back.
Rising anti-Semitism. New generations redefining how they connect with Jewish traditions. Changing dynamics among Jews around the globe. Take a deep dive into these topics and more on Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, the podcast brought to you by the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County. Hear from the thought leaders, politicians, scholars, and artists at the forefront of Jewish life today. Subscribe to Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Not good. Joseph, the other Joseph, Saint Joseph with Mary. Joseph contemplated divorcing Mary when he found out she was pregnant. And Jesus, when he was 12, ran off from his parents. And when they found him, he was unrepentant. So, even our Jesus was a little bit sassy. If you look back at photos, stories, things of back in the day, I think people had a lot of stuff going on behind closed doors. I think they didn't talk much about things. I think when family things arose, they were kept very tight within the family or just individually. I do think there was a tremendous amount of secrets going on back in the day, which resulted in many skeletons in many closets. Today, in contrast to today, I think today with social media, it's kind of a similar thing in the sense that people project out what they want the world to see. So on social media, you'll see photos of these family photos. Everybody looks happy and smiling and everything's peachy keen, but that's not maybe what's really happening. And so it's kind of a facade. It's fake, except for in contrast to the secrets that were going on back in the day and skeletons in the closet. Now everybody's just like pretty much airing their dirty laundry. There's a tremendous amount of information out there. It's hard to hide things these days. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that. Let me know what you think about that, because I generally think that it's really hard to keep things hidden these days. Somebody's going to find out something, and there's going to be a photo of it, and there's going to be proof of it, and you can never get rid of it. And once somebody finds out about something, it's spread all over the world. And I think back in the day when these secrets were kept tight and hidden, and maybe you didn't find out about things till years later, and there's not even any photo proof. It's one person's word against another. Nowadays, you better watch what you do, because there's probably a photo of it, and there's probably somebody who has saved text or something, so families, I don't know that there's as many family secrets today. I think the repercussions of family secrets from back in the day are catching up with those people today. That's happened in certainly in my family. I've said in a previous episode briefly, but my grandfather had kind of a secret life that none of us knew about. And that was very shocking to me. I'm not over it. I haven't gotten over it. I'm working on it. It was a surprise to my mother, and it really broke my heart because it was a family secret. He was a man that was very well thought of in the community, and I felt on a pedestal, and yet he was leading like this secret life. And now it's come out. That's damaging to me. My grandfather was married to my grandmother for many, many, many years, and they had 2 daughters, one being my mother. And years after my grandfather's passing and my grandmother's passing, my mom was, I think, in her late 70s, she found out in a horrible way, in my opinion, that her father had had an affair, and that the woman became pregnant and the child was born, and my grandfather had knowledge of this child for the entire, my grandfather's entire life and the child's entire life, and didn't let anybody know. And the child, when he became a very older man, found my mother and presented himself to my mother just out of the blue. That was really devastating to me, certainly, that, my grandfather had led this double life and had this child with another woman. And I don't know. I have no idea if my grandmother knew. I mean, I'll never know. But I would imagine she did not know. And my mother's happy she found out she had this sibling, but she was robbed of having this sibling for her entire life. Like, she didn't know until she was in her late 70s that she had a brother. I mean, that's too bad. She's enjoying it now. But just the fact that people were aware. The boy was aware that he had this father. He was aware that he had siblings, but nobody ever let anybody know. It's that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of that goes on. I have lots of stories like that about people that I'm close to, and people, my friends and some of my family members that have had things like this happen, and it's altered their life. They found things out that they didn't know their whole life. And all of a sudden this family secret comes out and they're reeling from it. At least the thing my grandfather did, it wasn't something that happened to me that directly affected me. It just made me feel bad for my grandmother. It made me feel bad for my mother and all the people involved. But the things that have happened to other people that I'm close to, it did affect their life. It changed their whole life, their vision of their heritage, their vision of their family, their vision of, what they thought to be true. They took somebody's word for something that was just not true. And it's changed their whole vision of what their heritage is or their life is. That's not good, Even if you think something is like embarrassing or shameful, when your children are old enough, you really should come clean. You really should just come clean. If you've made a bad mistake, if you've done something, you're ashamed of that could end up coming out later, it's better that they hear it from you than on the street. And I said this in the last episode. Don't make your friends and family hear things about you on the street. Tell them yourself. Come clean. It's going to make you feel so much better, to say, I have to tell you something. I had an affair, years ago, and this is what happened, and I'm so ashamed of it. And I've prayed about it. I've gone to confession about it. And I'm just telling you because please learn from my mistakes, something to that effect. Don't make it where someday they find out and then it makes you look like a liar. It makes you look like, then they'll think, well, I wonder what else they didn't tell me. I wonder what else they kept hidden. See, it has that effect on people. It starts like poisoning somebody's mind. It starts making people's wheels start turning, and not in a good way. So be the one that doesn't keep the family secrets. I don't think it's worth it. So nowadays there's these DNA test things you can take. Y'all better come clean if you have family members out there that you haven't told the other children about. But, this has posed quite a problem. Not a problem, maybe it's a solution. It really shined a light on when somebody finds out, wait a second, I was told I was this nationality or I had this background, and all of a sudden people have to come clean and go, oh, yeah, so you actually have a different dad, or you have a different mom, or you have a different grandfather. You're not German, you're actually Italian. It would be interesting to get those results and go, wait a second, I thought we were full German. Oh, actually, you're full Italian, you have a different dad. That sort of thing. I think you should probably make sure you've made people aware in your family so they don't find things out in this manner, because, then you're going to have a lot of explaining to do. You might as well preempt it. When there's a lot of these secrets or these things that have come up in families, those sorts of things start to separate and divide a family. There's a lot of things that end up being the downfall of the family unit. They could be things like addiction, where the parents have addiction and it taints everything in the family. The children grow up, that's their normal thing, is to have this addiction. So then they might become addicted to things like that. There could be things like perfectionism, where parents expect way too much of their children. They're living vicariously through their children. Maybe a dad who failed in sports puts a lot of emphasis on his children to perform in sports. But maybe the children don't want to perform in sports, and they end up resenting their dad because the dad pushes them so hard to fulfill what he didn't get to fulfill. I know people that have that in their family. There could be abuse or neglect. Sadly, there's a lot of abuse in families, which is just, I can't even wrap my mind around that, but that is a big, huge, ginormous factor in families where family members are abusing other family members. And when the person that's abused tries to go talk to mom or dad or grandma, they don't want to hear about what grandpa did. They want to brush it under the carpet. And then grandpa goes and does this to another child or whatever. That is, in my opinion, one of the major issues in the breaking up of families is abuse. There could also be physical abuse where people are, hitting and harming, torturing their children. I mean, this happens, and I can't believe it, but it does. Also, children who are neglected. Their parents maybe didn't want the child, and instead of giving it up for adoption, they, just kind of put the child in the corner as if it's a doll, and they can just put it on a shelf so they can just continue leading their life. That's not good. They'll push their kids off on other people because they want to go just lead their life as if they're a single person. That's not good. That breaks up a family. Children that live with unpredictability or fear, where they don't know, when they come home, what kind of parent am I going to have today? Is the parent going to be in a good mood? Is the parent going to be in a bad mood? Am I going to have to walk in on eggshells? All these are not good things. I've had that happen in my family. I've been the one that people are afraid to come home. What's Lori going to be like? Is she going to be in a good mood? Is she going to be in a bad mood? Do we have to walk on eggshells? Is she going to launch out at us? These are things that I've really had to work on, because I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the person that people don't want to come home because they're afraid of what they're coming home to. I don't want to be a person where people feel they have to walk on eggshells around me. I don't want that. I think I thought I knew I was kind of like that, but not to the degree of what was presented later and what I was told, how I was acting or presenting myself to people. I don't want to be the cause of a broken home. I don't want to be the cause of somebody feeling afraid. I don't want that. I've been working so hard on that, and I think I'm really succeeding. And it's only because of God's love, mercy, grace. I pray every day for, self-control, and I'm really working on it. And I couldn't do it if I didn't have God, just guiding me and helping me. So I hope other people will notice. It's hard when you're faced with people who are giving you conditional love. We're supposed to be unconditional with our family. Above all people, we should be unconditional with our family. And we're not. We're just not. There's a lot of conditions placed on our love today. I'll love you if you agree with me. I'll love you if you let me do whatever I want. I'll love you if I just get my way all the time. I don't agree with that. I think in a family, you have to have your standards, your boundaries, your guidelines, your rules. It's to keep people safe. It's to keep people, not running off the rails. Having lack of boundaries can also, that goes along with that. That could be a thing where, if you just let your children, especially your spouse, just have no boundaries and they go out and do whatever they want, I'm sorry to say, not sorry to say, that you know what? They're going to drive right off a cliff. That's what's going to happen. When you have no boundaries, when you have just where everybody's just kind of doing whatever they want, that is a recipe for failure in your family. Your spouse should know, I don't feel okay if you're going out and hanging out with a group of women. I don't feel good saying to your husband, I don't feel good if you have a woman best friend, and vice versa. I don't feel good if you're always going to parties without me. I don't feel good about that. Have some boundaries, and they should want to make you feel secure and not do those things. Your children shouldn't be asking things that they know are going to be dangerous for them. I mean, if they ask, like all children, it's like, can I go drive the car when I'm 14? It would be so fun. No, you can't. But Mom, no, you can't. Be the bad parent, I guess. Tell them no. When they start pushing boundaries, or you don't have any boundaries and they can just go do whatever, that's going to cause a rift in the family, because nobody should be getting to just do any old thing they want. I know that's what our world is teaching us today. If I feel good and I'm not hurting you, well, that's baloney. I'm sorry, that's baloney. Your family is going to break apart if people don't have consideration for the people in their family. You don't always get your own way. Lack of intimacy can be the downfall of a family. If the parents aren't relating and getting together and having alone time and building up and strengthening their marriage. Remember, we've talked about the priority pyramid in a past episode. You have God on the top with the spouses, and then the children, and so on. If the parents aren't keeping and building and strengthening their relationship with Christ, the whole family's going to crumble. It's just a fact. I challenge you. Go look at any family that's broken apart, and you will find one of these things that I've mentioned is the downfall for the family. It is what it is. It's the biggest source of pain in our lives is the downfall of the family because of one of these things that's caused it. And you know what? We all need to learn to communicate better too. And we all don't need to get our way. We can communicate with each other. We don't all have to agree on everything. We can agree to disagree. We can allow each other to be individuals and have things that are their specific thing. We don't always have to have our way. Let's use the example of political parties. So one's liberal, one's conservative. You don't have to talk about it every single time you get together. You don't have to battle about it. You don't have to fight about it. Everybody knows, oh, my brother's the liberal, I'm the conservative. Okay, why don't we just sit down and have dinner? Why don't we talk about something else? Why don't we talk about movies or something? You should be able to manage talking about things with your family without every topic, every interaction being a hot button topic, a controversy That's something that's going to cause a rift, cause a fight, cause division. It doesn't have to be that way. Be your individual selves. That's great. Like, embrace some of the things about each other. Maybe kind of laugh about it and go, well, my brother, the hippie, my sister, she's so buttoned up, she's, doesn't want to wear a bikini. I don't know. Like, I'm just using these as examples, but it's okay. It's okay to be different. We all don't need to eat vanilla ice cream. Let's put it that way. Something else that I don't know if this has always happened, I see it more and more today, is when families do break apart, or when there's a rift in a family, or somebody's not getting their way, they will break apart from the family and go find like a surrogate family. They'll find somebody that goes along with everything they're thinking and feeling, and they will gravitate to those people because those people are kind of like being yes men, like I talked about in the friendship episode, where you don't always want to be a yes man. You don't want to be like, oh, everything you're doing is stellar and wonderful. This is how people gravitate to gangs and cults and extremist groups, because those groups and those people will see a weakness in a person. Oh, this person has broken away from their family, so welcome into our group. Passport to sin. That's how I look at it. Gangs, cults, extremist groups. I don't feel like any of those are probably good groups to get aligned with. Think about it. When you think about those things in your head, none of those things really turn out well for anybody, honestly, if you're really honest about it. And I feel like they make sin okay. They are about violence and typically like drugs, alcohol, sex, lots of, like the 7 deadly sins, all the things that seem great, but ultimately are deadly. They're deadly. Sin is deadly. And people will look at a weak person, or a person who's weakened, maybe is a better way to put it. You could take a real strong person and they could be put in a weakened state. And boy, here come those wolves, and they're going to devour that person who's in a weakened state. And they're going to draw that person in to sin and break them away from their family. And that's just a recipe for disaster. So that's very concerning today that that's happening. Use the story of Pinocchio. Look what happened to him. He had this father who loved him. He went off to, I don't know what it was, Pleasure Island, Treasure Island. I don't remember, but you know what I'm talking about. He goes, he's living the life, and what happens? He ends up turning into an ass. And that's what happens to everybody. When you separate from your family and the people that love you, that is generally, people will latch onto you. Sometimes, however, let me just counterbalance that and say sometimes, let's say your family is the one that's really toxic, really horrible, and you are just devastated, a lost puppy, and you can gravitate to a group of people that is very, gives you hope, helps you. They're not drawing you to sin. They're drawing you to positive things, healthy habits, things that are enhancing you. They're not having you go down a dirty, dark path. They're having you go down a well-lit, beautiful path. Then that is God shining a light on your way out of a deep, dark situation. So remember, anything that is of light and unity and positivity is from God. Anything that's drawing you to sin is a path of darkness, and that is all Satan, my friends. That is all Satan. Don't go down that path. Discern what you want to do with those things. Okay, so with all this brokenness, with all this negativity, let's turn it around, shall we? So how can you strengthen your family through difficult trials and challenges? Or how can you even begin when they're younger to maybe keep your family on track. So again, let's keep the addiction to a minimum. If you need to drink very limited so you're not a drug addict or raging alcoholic and draw that into your family. Let's allow children to, find their own sports, interest, things that we can support instead of forcing them to be perfect or for us to live vicariously through them. Let's, try to encourage them to be their own individual. Please don't abuse your children. Please, and if you see any abuse going on in your family and your children report it to you, please handle it. Please be their champion. Please be their warrior. Please protect them from, even if it's, God forbid, grandpa or dad or something, be their champion. Save them. Like I said, don't be like me and lash out and make people feel like they're walking on eggshells. Try to be calm. But that being said, family should also not push people's buttons and cause people to react. That's not fair either. Give boundaries to your families. Healthy boundaries are great. Having rules and guidelines are great. People thrive on that. The children, if you ask a child if they want boundaries, of course they don't. Be the parent, make some boundaries. In the long run, it's going to make everybody feel better. Keep your marriage alive and well and safe and happy and healthy and strong with Christ and each other. Communicate is another good way to keep your family going strong. Communicate in positive ways. Don't always say negative things. Try to say, gosh, I'm really proud of you for cleaning your room. That was great. I'm really proud of you that you helped out with your little baby sister. That was so nice. Communicate so everybody knows what's going on so nobody has worries or wonders. When you're having difficult trials and challenges, keep teaching good values. Remind your family of your good values. Have a weekly family night where the bulk of the group can get together. Don't make it all serious, but go over some family business. Have a nice meal. Maybe play a game afterward. Do something where it's not all negative, but it's like, what was your highs and your lows of the week? What do we need to work on as a family? What do we have coming up that we can do as a family? Try to have family dinner nights, as many nights a week as you can. That's going to build your family up. Do family events together that are in the house, outside the house. Break down into smaller groups if you need to, but that's how you'll keep it going. Pray together as a family. I think that's an amazing thing to do. Pray more together. Think about that group prayer. That's going to be a strong prayer. That would be great. Go to Mass together. Go to church together if you're not Catholic. That's really important. First of all, if you're Catholic, you're required to go. So go as a family. Make it a good thing, like I've talked about in past episodes. Prepare for it. Dress nice. Go together. Be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as my mother would say, and then maybe go out for lunch afterward, or go to the movies, or go to the park, or go to the beach. Make it a fun day, something to look forward to. One of the quotes that I really like, last quote I have, is by Coco. Who is Coco? I'm not quite sure. There was no last name on this, so is it Coco Chanel? I don't know. Is it Coco, my son? That's his nickname. We may have our differences, but nothing's more important than family. That's very true. Friends come and go. Family is forever. I know there's a joke where it's like you're stuck with families or whatever, but in the Bible, one of the most famous stories, I would say, is the story of the prodigal son. So that's from Luke 15. So just a summary of that is that the plot centers around a younger son who is impatient and greedy and asks his father for his inheritance. The father agrees, but the son wastes his money and eventually becomes homeless and destitute. In the end, to the son's great surprise, he is welcomed back into the family by his father. So, I think the ideal and the ultimate would be, in all these traumas and trials in our families and all the things we go through in broken families. Don't we all have an ideal in our mind that wouldn't it be nice if we could all get together, get back together, sit down, have a meal together, spend time together, not always focusing on negativity, past wounds, past hurts. Wouldn't it be nice if we could love each other, have forgiveness, have reconciliation? Life is too short to always be divided. I'm divided from so many people in my life right now, and it doesn't feel good. It's very heartbreaking to me, and life is short. And I have dreams about seeing people, hugging people, spending time with people, having peace, love, and harmony. That's what God wants. God wants unity. God loves family. God wants us together. Another thing you shouldn't do with your family members is, steal from them, do something deceitful. That's never going to work out for anybody. I've had people reach out to me and say that their family members are doing that. That's not good to do to anybody, but especially your family. Don't do stuff like that. Anyway, thank you for listening today. I hope this helped. I hope this, maybe gives people hope or ideas. I don't always mean to be just always negative, but we got to talk about these serious issues. They're happening in our world. It's not all peaches and cream out there. And we do have a chance to make things better, but we can't do it if we don't talk about it and we don't, acknowledge that it's happening. So thank you for listening, and a little bit of Fresh Catholic News. So again, I've been kind of swamped this month with some things, and it's not that I'm being lazy and not doing my blog or, putting my things on YouTube. I'm a little bit overwhelmed and swamped right now, but look out next month because I'm coming back stronger and bigger and better. So thank you for being patient with me. I'm just more and more just so appreciative with people, on the daily, reaching out to me and just telling me how much they love the podcast, love the 30-second videos on Instagram. More and more is coming. Thank you to the people who've reached out and said that they are going to help me financially with this podcast. I appreciate that so very much. You don't know how much that means to me. So if anybody else is interested, we are looking for some donations, and my Patreon's going to be up soon. So I'm excited about that. I'll have some things on there for you to, extra added things. So anyway, thank you. Love you. Bye. Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. Fresh Catholic is recorded at Wonder Mouse Studios at the Castle at Pierpont in Ventura, California. My producer and engineer is Sarah Espel, and she could be yours too. Our podcast studio is available for rent. You can reach us at wondermouse.us or freshcatholic.com.